Hello and welcome to episode 102 of Random Encounter, the RPG fan podcast. We're actually going for something a little different here. This podcast episode is just so massive and would take such a huge undertaking to get done that
Nope, nope,
we're going to split it up into parts.
nope,
We're going to
I
release.
should have known.
nope. Look, no cloud and no squall will hinder that $180 game.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of 2 of Random Encounter. I'm your host, Robert Steinman. Pale Robbie on the board. Sorry for that funny intro. We're going to get right into it today, guys.
Funny,
Oh, come on. It was slightly clever. That's Stephen Meyerink, everybody.
Taylor's on the boards, which I'm not on very much lately, except to show up and disagree with people and then leave.
Well, you have a lot of things going on in the Japans. I mean,
No, look, I have a lot of Phoenix Wright work to do.
Again, you remind me of Gumshoe. That is who I think of whenever you make that face or that sound. That's the sound I think Gumshoe makes. All right.
Hey, pal.
I make that sound?
I think
Look, pal.
so. I think so. All right. Derek Heemsbergen.
Here, me to it.
What's up? I'm Embryon on the boards. I never post on the boards. I think it's funny that we always give those, and the only time I post on the public boards is like in the podcast thread, rarely. But other than that, it's all behind the scenes, guys. Sorry. Hey, what's up? I'm here to talk about Xenoblade, among other things. It's gonna be great.
You have been talking about your Skells constantly.
My Skells.
Skells.
That
Let me
sounds like
tell
a
you
skin
something.
condition.
That's Caitlin Argyros, everybody.
Lean Kazero on the boards. I'm also kind of shy on the public boards, but I try to get out there more often.
How's your Skell?
I haven't got mine yet. I'm not far enough, but I see a lot of sexy ones in the city, and I want them.
I can get them, and then they were like, here, grind Division Quest for 300 years. And I was like,
Okay, so of course we are going to talk about the Xenoblade Chronicles X. I think I'm the only one who doesn't have a Wii U, so I'm the only one who's not playing this game right now. But
you
I
don't like Smash Brothers because you're not actually a human being.
okay,
oh my gosh, Derek is right.
let's go through a couple of things here. First off, I don't have a lot of people to play Smash Brothers
You
with.
can play it online. With us.
I don't like to play fighting games online though. I mean, I would side with Rob on that one. Rob, I'm just giving you crap.
I know, but I haven't really been into Smash Brothers in a long time. Okay, I'm kind of a recovering Smash Brothers addict. I played quite a lot of it when I was in college. Thank you. But we've talked about before, there's not a whole lot on the Wii U that I'm interested in. But seeing all these Skells flying around is certainly making me kind of think about reaching for my wallet right now. So Xenoblade Chronicles X.
I will scale you something right now. They are awesome.
They do seem pretty awesome. So Xenoblade Chronicles X. Let's talk about this game. Would we say it's definitely a sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles? Definitely a sequel, right?
Yeah, I
Spiritually.
mean, not narratively, but yeah.
The combat is an expanded version of the Xenoblade combat system. And it has giant robots, so I mean, I really feel like that's all we need to get.
Yeah.
And a lot of the same basic systems.
Show's over. Bye. Pack it up.
Yeah. The story is completely and 100% divorced from everything in Xenoblade 1. There's nothing that carries over except Nopon, and the Nopon in this one's not even as good as Ricky, so.
Really?
It has more thematically in common with Xenogears than it does with Xenoblade, which is fine with me as.
Shockingly, Caitlin likes that.
Yeah.
So you don't actually, do you, maybe this is a bit of a spoiler, so if it is, just tell me to shut up and I won't bring it up again. Do you actually have a Xenoblade? Do you get the Monado?
No.
Really? I want the
Not as
Monado.
far as I've seen. I mean.
Interesting. But that's kind of been, these games are all thematic in that they focus in on giant mechs punching out God. Hello, Evangelion. Totally.
Wait, no, there is a Xenoblade because the organization you work for fights Xenos,
That's true.
and it's called Blade.
You're right.
But
Okay, so there is
physical sword, as far as I know.
Sadly, no.
I haven't beaten it though, so I mean, maybe it shows up. Maybe you're spoiling the final twist, Rob. What a jerk.
I'm sorry.
Robert.
It's not
Thanks,
what
Rob.
I'm not trying to do it. Um.
Unintentionally a spoiler.
Well, so there's no metal face in the game. Shulk isn't running around like it.
Shulk's
Oh, I've
voice
seen
actor.
Shulk. I've seen several Shulks, but they're player avatars named Shulk.
The number of people in that game, because it's like sort of like they're happening, and like you join groups, and like everyone is working towards common goals, and the number of people named Ricky, Dunban, and Shulk I've seen is just I would say it's over half the players are like blonde dudes with Shulk's voice actor and Shulk's name.
Oh,
Yeah.
Shulk's voice actor is actually in the game.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Shulk's voice actor is one of the Avatar voice actors, and that's the one I picked.
Now, does he speak with his accent? Because that was actually something you were telling me about,
Only
Steve.
written in the game besides Fiora's voice actress, who is a girl Avatar voice.
That's
Okay.
the voice I use.
Yeah.
And Shulk actually says I'm really feeling it in his voice. So
They
that's...
actually,
Yeah,
it's funny because they all do.
Oh,
It's
they do?
Yeah, I think that reached a meme critical mass, and they were like, we got to put it in there, because I was using the rebel voice for my avatar. Which, by the way, I think it's really cool that all of the voice actors, like, they have a personality. So there's rebel, heroic, classic, which is Schultz. They have the actual voice actor's name credited to it, so it's like heroic Yuri Lowenthal.
Yeah,
So-
I'm glad that's becoming a thing.
So yeah,
I remember
Adam.
Thanks did that.
Yeah, it's good that they credit them. So Adam Howden is Schultz, his voice is in there. But yeah, I was using the rebel voice, and one of the soul voice triggers is just, I'm really feeling it. And it's like, yeah, really? Come on.
It's like, of course you are.
It's funny.
And plus, if you play the classic, it's backslash. I can just relive being Shulk and everything. He's just
Yeah,
like,
it was
backslash!
Did
it was
anybody?
funny just using the other voices and hearing them use, because there are some attacks that carry over, like backslash. So hearing your other guy shout backslash is like, what strange new amalgamation chimera Xeno game am I playing right now?
No, it's like Shulk opened up a combat dojo and is teaching everyone his moves, and they're spreading. Now everyone can backslash just like Shulk.
You can stream edge!
Or maybe it's an exercise program, you know? Yeah, I went there.
I'm actually really happy about that.
It's the Smash Brothers exercise program. I'm really feeling
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so let's kind of back up here a little bit. Let's talk about this game a little bit. So when they first showed this game, it was just, dude, look at this landmass. Look what you can just run all over exploring, and oh, we gave you a mech because mechs are cool, and so you can fly all around this environment. Is that kind of the crux of what this game is about? Is just like, look at this amazing world that we've created, now go explore?
Yeah.
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 I think it is.
Like the narrative is sort of built around it, sort of like the way Dragon Age Inquisition builds all of its side quests into you are doing things that are strengthening the reputation and the assets of the Inquisition. All of Xenoblade is sort of, humanity is on this planet, and we're trying to, learn more about it and make it more habitable. So everything you do sort of feeds into that as like a meta-narrative reason. So it's definitely like exploring is sort of both the goal of your organization and the like thrust of the game.
Yeah, and while it is impractical to do so, from the very moment you leave the intro cutscene, you can just walk wherever you want. Like, the whole world's open to you, basically. I mean, assuming they don't drop some secret late game area, that's locked behind story progress. But you can just walk wherever. Any of the 5 continents. If you can dodge aggro, if you can swim around and stuff, like, you can just go. You will want to go to town and pick up missions and, like, advance the story first, but it's just cool that it really is an open world, and I have extreme open world fatigue, just like you do, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
But this world's design is it's far and above the usual, because much like Xenoblade, I think original Xenoblade Chronicles has one of the most uniquely designed and realized worlds I've explored in an RPG. This is like, it's similar. It's not quite as novel, I guess, because it's an alien planet versus 2 dead gods, but it's so unique. There are so many amazing vistas, and it's all
it's also what surprises me about the breadth of the world is that excuse me, what surprises me about the breadth of the world is that you have these very prototypical sort of biomes, like desert place, jungle place. But much like with Xenoblade, I'm going to call it Shulkblade from now on. Much like with Shulkblade, they do a lot within the framework of that, where it's, it doesn't just feel like you're like, oh, look, a desert. Like there's interesting, rock outcroppings. There's, I think the combat is great. But it all sort of works narratively, like it was clearly thought through how these things relate and how this planet as an ecosystem operates.
Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
things that you can see passively is you can just see creatures wandering around, and some of them are hostile, some are not. In the starting area, you see these gigantic sort of they're brachiosaur or something alien-like dinosaurs that are 80 levels above you, and they won't aggro you, but they're just sort of peacefully grazing or drinking from this lake. So you can see them, and then sometimes you'll see monsters like spiders will fall down from the ceiling, and worms will come, like gigantic sandworms will come out of the sand in the desert. It's like,
Oh
Sandworms.
yeah,
I got
yeah,
killed by one
yeah.
of those.
yeah, you see
Sandworms.
this
Yeah.
entire ecosystem happening. It's all there. It existed before the humans got there, and you're just sort of stumbling upon it.
Yeah, the Dinosauruses won't aggro you unless you do an area of effect attack on top of them,
Right.
which I
Which
can
you found out the hard way.
From
I
experience,
confirm is a bad idea.
Yeah.
well, a bad idea in that it probably got you killed, but like the original Xenoblade, you don't really get penalized for it.
Yeah.
So why not
Yeah,
experiment?
they the map is built around a system of hexes, so each hex has like objects of interest in it, and once you've cleared a hex of everything of interest, potential quests, tyrants, whatever, it shows up as reconned on the map. And almost every hex has a teleport point, so there's a lot less. I died, now I have to run across the map to get back where I need to be. And furthermore, there's a sprint button, and you jump like an NBA player. So even before
Turns
you
out white man can jump. You jump like the Hulk. I think that's more accurate.
uh,
It's absurd. You got killed by a dinosaur.
I
That
did get
happens.
killed by a
Hexes.
dinosaur. You jump like an NBA player.
Teleport.
You
Uh,
just completely knocked him out.
Sorry.
it makes getting around a lot more fun because, like, there's a certain design philosophy where it's like you shouldn't be able to jump 60 feet in the air across the map. That's ridiculous. But it's like this game is sort of about the joy of getting around this world. So like half of the fun I have in that game is sprinting and then leaping from like mountaintop to mountaintop. It's not that extreme, but you have a lot more jump than Shulk did. And the game is sort of designed around that. Like you can find like clever ways to get up somewhere. Like I had a quest, I had to go like run through this whole area and fight all these jerks with guns. And instead I just went around back and leapt up the side and then walked in and finished the quest and left.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of games have those sort of like you'll see the rocky outcroppings that look like you might be able to kind of fudge your way up if you mess around long enough, like almost glitch up. But this actually encourages it. You can totally do that all over the place. Like I
Yeah,
had a quest where not just that, but like I needed to get to a specific part on this one continent that was like way on the far edge of like the opposite side of where I had reconned. So I just ran to the closest edge that I could find, jumped into the ocean, and swam all the way around to the other side. It took me like actually 5+ minutes real time, but I did it. And I was able to find a beach on the other side and get up there. So it encourages
they
exploration.
also they kept the secret areas from the first, because my initial concern, because you have the entire world map available to you when you enter an area of all the hexes, but what's in each one is not revealed to you, and so I was worried that it was going to be like nothing secret because it's all marked on the map, but there's actually still quite a few. Like you'll enter a cavern and it's like you found an uncharted area, and like secret stuff like that. For me, what I like about that is one of the things I loved about the first game so much was especially towards the end, just getting super powerful and like tweaking the hell out of your party and then hunting tyrants or like super monsters.
Yeah.
And there's a faction you can join in the game that gives you points for fighting tyrants. So I sort of forgot about the story once I got to chapter 6 or whatever, and I'm just roaming the map hunting tyrants. But they really, within the gameplay and within the narrative, they really push home that you are exploring this world and that you're being rewarded for that based on what faction you join in the way you choose to explore. Like if you just like to go and find mesas and and chart uncharted stuff, you can join a division that specializes in that and get rewarded for doing that even more.
Now, the cynical argument to be had here is that you guys are talking about all this exploration, all this like going around the world. And that immediately makes me want to ask about the questing system in this game, which, being an outside observer, and I've read, reviews and stuff, I can't speak to whether or not this is really happening, but I wouldn't be doing my show as the host, my job as the host, if I didn't ask. Do you guys feel like there is a lot of copy paste content in this game? Do you guys feel like there's enough story content? Like, Derek, you talked a little bit about open world fatigue. Are you still feeling any of that with this game, or is it the world, the breadth, the scales, all of this is enough to kind of keep those open world monotonous tasks that kind of come up in lots of games from kind of overtaking you? How do you guys feel about that?
I think narratively it's much weaker than the first game. And there are a lot of go kill monster quests. In fact, I think almost every story quest I've done has been go hunt 3 of this or go do that. And that could change, but the story, from what I understand, is actually not that long. And again, I don't know that for sure. That's more or less just hearsay. But I got through half of the game's chapters in one weekend of playing for about 12 hours. But again, there's a lot of like in between, like you have to explore. I would say it does have a lot of grind. In my opinion, I mean, I can't speak for Derek or Caitlin, but I like it a lot. But I definitely doubt I will do everything in this game, because you can sort of you can take on the real quests. They're like affinity quests that like you relate to party members, and everyone does have good stories. Like the quests that involve story are pretty great, but there's a lot of like there's still those go kill 5 of these or go find me 5 of these blue crystals. But now you get them all from a board, which is good. You don't have to go talk to 5,000 people in town. You still get quests from people in town, but most of the tedious quests that you just do by doing other things are at the board. But I would say, like, on the whole, narratively, it's much weaker, and the quest design, I think, is sort of like the first Xenoblade, but now that the game is focused on these things, I could definitely see someone getting tired of that, but I think that the combat and exploration are so good that the objectives you're doing are not as big a deal.
And it does have the auto turn in thing.
Yeah.
Xeno, did the original have that as well?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So it's
I mean,
like
for most quests.
Yeah, if it was like a person you had to talk to continue a story thing or like a side quest with someone's narrative, you had to talk to them.
I think they did a better job here of compartmentalizing different kinds of quests. Like the ones from the original Xenoblade that were really grindy, where it was literally just go kill this unique monster or collect a certain number of this collectible. You get pretty much all of those from, they're called basic missions because they're the most,
they basic as hell.
Yeah, basic. And you get them from a board. You don't have to do any of those missions if you don't want to, outside of, I think, a few are required for triggering affinity quests. But otherwise, you can leave them alone if you want. I mean, you'll get experience and rewards from them, but you don't have to. You won't see like a quest icon pop up on your map, and it's just going to be a bunch of kill these monsters like in the original Xenoblade, where you would be kind of compelled to do them because you saw the icon on the map or over someone's head, and you're like, oh, hey, a quest. I need to do that. If you want them, they're on the board. If you don't want them, you never have to touch them for the most part, which was a good move on their part to, have it be there if you want, but not kind of for the OCD person, have it like glaring right in their face. Oh, unfinished quest.
Yeah, it actually mirrors the quest system in Lightning Returns, now that I think about it, because that had the the canvas of prayers or something. They basically had like the fetchy quest of kill X number of things, collect X number of things, and those were separate from the actual side quests that involved any sort of narrative. And then you had the main story quests in that. So this is actually the same format, because you have the basic missions, which are collect X number of things. You have the normal missions, which are a little bit more narrative heavy. You have the main story missions, and then on top of that, you have the affinity missions, which in original Xenoblade Chronicles, there were the heart-to-hearts that were just sort of little cutscenes that you unlocked with people as you raised your affinity with each party member, or even between 2 other party members besides Shulk. And in this one, they have the affinity missions, which are storyline-specific missions that involve particular characters, and they're pretty robust.
Yeah.
And many of them are required at certain points to progress the story. So it'll be like, to unlock chapter 5, because you get your story quests from a central hub area. So it'll be like, to unlock chapter 5, you have to do this particular affinity mission with this person, and also have mapped 20% of one continent or something like that. So I think that the reason why it gates story that way is because some of those character quests develop that character in such a way that is relevant to the main plot. But otherwise, there are tons of other affinity quests that you don't have to do at all. But if you have a particular party member that you like, and there are many of them, there's over
18,
10.
I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez, 18? Yeah, there are a ton of people to choose from.
5 in DLC, I think, right? Or
Yeah, which we
Or-
got for free.
Yeah. So
That's
if there's a character
4,
you
5.
like, which you should find because there are that many, you can choose to do that character's affinity missions and then overlook all the rest, besides the few mandatory ones. So by splitting its quests into these sort of different tiers, I think that it does a really good job of allowing the player to select how they want to devote their time. It's like, do you just want to go run around the world and explore without any particular objective? Okay, then take a bunch of basic quests, and you'll be completing them automatically as you're doing whatever you want to do. Do you want to advance the story? You can take a story quest. Do you want to get to know a character? Do an affinity quest. Like, it just, I think that they've learned a lot about how to structure their quests in this game, and it lends itself well to this world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think they all. Sorry, Caitlin, go ahead.
No, I was going to agree. And I was going to agree with you as well about, I also think that the main story it's weaker than Xenoblade. I don't want to say it's disappointing. It's just, if you go into it expecting the same kind of story from the original, it's not going to be what you expect. Because really the focus of the game, I feel, it's not as much of that sort of epic journey, a quest to destroy the evil enemy. It's more of like, hey, this is our home now, this a vast, dangerous place, and we have to learn how to live in it.
It's a world
evil
building game.
evil
And
gorillas chased us here.
They do
And
that.
I guess when I think about it in that sense, it actually makes more sense to me that they kind of spread out story between what is, quote unquote, main story and side stuff like affinity missions and normal quests that you can get from some of the residents of New LA or NLA, which is the main hub world.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
the
Sorry,
music.
I wanted to sing the new LA song.
No more coffee for Steven before a podcast.
That's the song that plays in New LA. Like,
Well, I'm sure we'll talk about the music, but holy crap, it's
song
very
is-
very different, and some of it is
yes.
good, most of it is good,
Yes.
but it's super different. And I'm stuck on a different planet.
I think like the story, you gotta, if you're expecting music from the last game, this is not probably, it's gonna surprise you. Maybe in a good way. I've seen a lot of people who at first were like, and then they played it and they're like, wow, this is actually pretty good.
Should they have
absolutely.
called?
I totally agree with that. Like, the thing is, a lot of people are like telling me on Twitter, like, "Oh God, how do you like that song? It's so bad." And I'm like, "Well, no." I'm like, "It's different." Like, a lot of people, and and this goes back to what I've been saying for months, that this should not have been called Xenoblade Chronicles X. It should have been called it should have been called like Xeno
World
Space Ninjas or whatever the hell they want to call it. I don't care, but it shouldn't have been called Xenoblade. I get why it's called that because systemically it's the same, but like it's so unreal. That expectation is making people expect a very JRPG story, and this is very not like, character based. Go chase the bad guy, like Caitlin said. The music fits the sci-fi setting really well. My roommate would disagree if he could hear me because he heard some of the music and he's like, that is terribly not fitting. But I think it fits the sort of dirty, like grim sci-fi feel of the game really well. And I would challenge anyone playing that game not to get really excited when you fight a tyrant and the tyrant battle scene starts. Because I'm like, I'm going to start doing backflips and kill this dinosaur.
I think I mentioned this on Rhythm Encounter because I picked that theme on one of our last episodes, but I did not think that they could make a music track that could beat You Will Know Their Names from the original Xenoblade, but they kind of did, because Uncontrollable is kind of just freaking awesome. So
I have a two-tiered response to that. Number one, because it's Hiroyuki Sawano and that particular theme has Mika Kobayashi on vocals, it just sounds like you're playing an episode of Kill la Kill, first of all, and that's amazing.
Yeah, it does.
Second of all, I actually have a theory about the sort of the design of Xenoblade Chronicles X, and it's that Whereas Xenoblade Chronicles original was like a sort of MMO styled game with like open, bigger world MMO style game, but with the kind of JRPG linearity structure, character focused narrative thing. Like that was what that was going for. And then this is something of a more Western approach to that same idea. So it takes the parts of Xenoblade Chronicles original that were more like linear and flips them on their head. And like with the music, I feel like the music is also also a more Western take. And to me, like the feeling that I get from that soundtrack is kind of like contemporary humans trying to find meaning or trying to find their feet in a strange environment. Because there's like the juxtaposition of the intensely alien, unusual environs and creatures with this like sort of dirty. There's a lot of like hip hoppy vocals. Like it's very human. It's very Earth-like, and it's this earthy music on an alien planet. So I think that it actually works pretty well.
Yeah, I think there are probably more tracks on this one that I outright balk at maybe than the first one. To say there's like 3 or 4 as opposed to none. But like as an example, I think the singer in the main battle theme, and I know Sawano works with this singer a lot, and to me he just sounds like Diet Lotus Juice.
Isn't it? I was gonna say it sounds just like Lotus Juice.
Like I think, and the problem is that it's not necessarily just that the words don't work, because I don't mind the words, because I think the duet in Uncontrollable, the Tyrant battle theme, is amazing. Like
yes.
When like the guy starts singing and then the woman sings the counter verse, like, oh my god, it's so good. But like in the main battle theme, like what he's saying is complete nonsense. He's like, well, no, it's not nonsense. It's too on the nose. He's like, this planet sucks. I need a bigger gun. Whoa. Like, I'm like, no, you don't get to sing about exactly what I'm doing. Plus, I'm going to get a bigger gun. I'm going to get a big robot.
I think it's
Are you saying that if you were playing Bastion, if the narrator started breaking out into some rap hip hop about what you were literally doing, you wouldn't find that cool?
Well, but that's what he does. That he's the narrator. The singer of the battle theme in Xenoblade is like, it's different. Look, I'm not.
Well, the good thing is that
are actually different.
The good thing is most of the battles are brief enough that you probably won't be hearing the lyrics that much.
Yeah.
And even if you get to them, you probably won't hear them over the chatter between your party members, which...
All right, topple them with gunfire. Let's go.
Use an aura!
Yeah.
Killing machine!
Yeah.
I was just listening to that. That is pretty awesome. Like, right. I was just listening to Uncontrollable because Steven was like, you need to listen to this. I'm like, all right, rolling my eyes at, whoa.
See?
Knew Rob would like it. Frame of reference.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now, something that I haven't heard a whole lot about with this game, and I'm kind of surprised because it's one of the first things they showed about it, or at least hinted at. How's the online? Talk to me a little bit about the online of this game.
It's really cool the way they've implemented it.
It's unobtrusive.
At the start, like, you join squads that can have up to, 32 people in them, I think. And it's not that you see everyone running around. It's sort of like what was the word that they used to describe it?
Asynchronous?
Yeah. Yeah, like you'll see their avatars, but they'll be like NPCs that you can talk to and recruit and into your party. And when you do, they're controlled by the AI, not by like the actual person playing them. But while you're playing in the squad, you'll get periodically these tasks. They'll be like kill a certain number of monsters or gather a certain number of items or collectibles. And every time you complete one of those things, you'll activate missions that you can go on with your squad mates. And then you can actually pair up in like groups of 4 and play with the other people to take down like a particularly dangerous indigent or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you do enough of those, like if not just like your squad, but if everyone playing the game does enough of that, you'll unlock a really dangerous monster called like a world nemesis or something like that. And then everyone can work together to take that thing down. So it's cool the way they have it start off. Like if you don't want to do like traditional online co-op where you're playing with other people, you don't have to. You can do the squad tasks, which are just you running around doing things. But if you want to play with other people, you can, and it gives you kind of a goal to work towards to be able to play in squads with other people.
Yeah, actually, I had Caitlin in my party for a little while. I went to go do a mission, and we had just joined squads, and like Caitlin's character is Emeralda from Xenogears, and looks just like her.
Oh,
Thank
Um,
sweet.
you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so you know, actually that brings me to one of my complaints about the story is that most of the story missions have compulsory members, and it's almost always so far been the same two,
Yeah,
and
Ellen Lynn.
and it's hard to use other characters in the story because they very often will restrict that. So oftentimes I have an empty fourth party slot where it's like, oh, who am I going to use? And I went and was doing a story mission, and Caitlin happened to be there, so Caitlin joined my party for that. And she has Fiora's voice, so it was Shulk and Fiora battling, and it was awesome.
Yes, very awesome. Yeah,
My
I couldn't.
character's name
I
is
knew
just-
I was gonna make Emeralda. The minute that we were told that you would customize your avatar, I was like, I'm making Emeralda because the art style of the way the character, the sort of like the anime style look of the characters is, very reminiscent of Xenogears and Xenosagas. So it's like the perfect way to create your favorite character from the Xeno universe in this game. So of course I made
Yeah, I
Emeralda.
agree. We sort of hinted at it a little bit, and forgive me if I'm stealing your thunder here, Rob. But I also like the combat in the game. Like I've heard some people say they don't like it because it plays sort of like an MMO, and I disagree. It's MMO inspired, but there's a lot more, at least to me, because you're in control of more things. It's a little more active. The base system is the system from the first Xenoblade. But they've made a few small changes, and one of them is that now that you pick your own class, you go through like a tree. Like I picked a class that wields 2 guns and 2 knives, and so you can press Y at any time to swap between your gun and your melee weapon, and you have arts that are dedicated to each. And so like you also now have a special meter, like TP, that builds up that you need to use your more powerful attacks. And so the gun weapon, at least in my class, the gun attacks tend to be much better at building up the special meter and like weakening the enemy. And then I switch to my melee weapon and charge in.
And
And
it's
then
based
do
on
it.
hits.
Yeah, and then you charge in and do a ton of damage. And what's cool is that if you master the skill tree you're in, you actually gain the ability to use that weapon with other classes. So I mastered the first tree that lets you use dual machine pistols and dual swords, and then moved on to one that uses a spear and a sniper rifle, and it's awesome. And so like as you level more and more, you're getting access to more and more arts, and you sort of get the ability to sort of create your own character type. And that combined with the fact that so now in the first game when your skills were recharging, you just couldn't do anything with them. You would just sit there and auto attack. In this one, now you have an option, so your skill will recharge, and then if you're wielding that weapon, a second meter will slowly fill up around each skill, and as you let the meter fill up, it increases the potency of the skill. So like for example, backslash does a ton of damage from behind. So rather than doing what I did in Xenoblade 1, which is every time I got backslash immediately trying to either activate a chain or do a ton of damage from behind, now it's like, oh well, why don't I use my other skills to build up a really good combo? By the time backslash is charged to its second level, then it does like 400% more damage. But then there's like emergencies where it's like, oh no, I have to use my art now that makes me heal when I attack because I'm dying. So it's like there's a lot more that you're thinking about at any given moment. At least for me, that's what it seems like. And that's to say nothing of the soul voice thing, which is every party member has a soul voice, which is like different conditions in battle will happen. They're sort of like gambits where like, oh, if you do a critical hit, then Elmo will yell, "Ooh, the enemy is weak. Now we should move in and do a thing." And then certain arts that you have will chain with theirs, and it'll increase the effect. And it's actually fairly complicated. The game has a lot of complicated systems that it makes relatively little effort to explain. But the net result is that I think the combat is fantastic. And for me, what I love most about the first game at the end was just hunting monsters. It really is just awesome to just explore the world and find super monsters, and then just get into these really interesting, like strategic, movement heavy battles that work really well. Also, you can jump in combat now.
Mm-hmm.
And run and sprint too.
And sprint, yeah. So if an enemy like dashes away from you, you can sprint up to it and attack it again, or shoot it.
That was maybe the only thing about Xenoblade Chronicles, the original game, that I never felt fully comfortable with was like because I only played the game as Shulk, which I would say a lot of gamers probably did. I don't want to say every gamer did, but I primarily played as Shulk so I could use the Monado and kind of focus in on backslashes and stuff.
I'm
But
really feeling it.
there were moments that I really didn't understand how combat was working, but I almost find that to be a good thing because the AI was so smart that like Charla was healing me when she needed to heal me. And so when I ran into problems in that game and I got killed, I would usually just go back and level up 2 or 3 times and then just steamroll whatever just killed me. So it was weird in that I never felt like I fully grasped the combat system, but I almost mean that as a good thing. Like I knew what my role was in combat, playing as Shulk, and I could focus in on that. And the AI was smart enough to keep me alive. Do you guys kind of feel that way in this game? Can you move between characters during combat?
You can only control your guy, but it's not like Shulk, where you only have one set of skills. Your character, every character in the game is comprised of skills that you could also acquire, and then they have a few unique ones that they gain through quests and stuff.
Hmm.
But whatever role you want to have, you can be that skill tree, basically. Like, I basically play Shulk. I play a heavy damage class. And, so my role is I'm doing similar considerations to what I did as Shulk in the first game. But, like, if you want to be, like, more of a support base, or if you want to set up combos, there are other skill classes that do that. Like, if you want to use Ryan's weapon, the shield thing, you can do that, and so on and so forth. There's no, I don't know that any class gets a dedicated healing spell in this one because of the way the combat is built.
There are a couple of skills that will directly heal you. None of them are like a super duper heal. Like, Charlotte had really powerful heals because she was your primary healer. But I think that's intentional with the way they designed the system. I think they looked at combat in the original Xenoblade and said that a lot healing isn't super necessary in that game. You actually do not need the dedicated healer for most of the game because battles are either over quickly enough or what healing skills that you do have, like Shulk has a basic heal, get you through. So
I
they
actually
kind of, what?
Good. I was going to agree with you because I disagreed with you when I was playing Xenoblade because I kept telling you that I was like really annoyed that I had to have Charlotte all the time or somebody that could heal, and you're like, oh, you don't. I'm like, yeah, but then I'll die. She's like, no, you'll do more damage. And then I switched to my party, which was the last character you get, Dunban and Shulk, and then you win battles so much faster that you're not needing to heal.
Yeah, that's kind of the trade-off. And I think they thought about that here too, because you don't have a dedicated healing class and you don't really have a lot of healing skills. You heal by performing soul voices, so like using the skills that your party members are calling for, and then the B button prompts where it's like the circle and you have to time the button press correctly will also get you a little bit of HP restoration. So it's
Which
more about paying attention to your party and having, maybe a little bit of a QTE, but a manageable one and one that doesn't necessarily feel punishing or anything.
and you can through the soul voices and through fighting well. Again, I like what you said, Caitlin, about by being really proactive and paying attention to combat, you can keep yourself healed. And I really like that system because it's not that I dislike the DPS tank healer role thing that's so popular in a lot of games, but this sort of lets you think about the battle on like a broader set in a broader sense than just, all right, well, I'm going to have to get healed because I'm definitely going to take damage. It's like, no, if I set up this combo, I'll get my B button prompt and I can heal. And then, like as my character class, I have a skill that cuts my HP in half, but it gives me 1,000 TP. So I can immediately do like a blast attack really quickly. And then I have a skill that costs TP that makes every attack I do heal me. So it's like I'll use that, do a ton of damage with that skill active, and regain the health I lost. And
Yeah.
then because I'm fighting, if you fight well and you're working with your party, you're getting those B button prompts. So like basically the way to stay alive is to fight well.
I like that strategy. It works well for me.
It works well in every game, in fact. Yeah.
I'm a big fan. But yeah, I think the combat is just awesome. Like it's refined in the right places from Xenoblade, and like it's clear that they knew what the critiques of the combat in the first one were. Like, oh, an enemy gets away and I can't catch them, or I can't jump in combat, so I get stuck behind a wall. It's just it feels mechanically a lot more polished, even though on the surface it looks like it's almost the same thing.
Hmm.
And again, eventually you get a giant robot that can punch people's faces off.
The
So
Skells, man, the Skells.
Yeah.
I can't talk about that. Only Derek can. You're the only one that has a big robot. Can you fly yet?
I cannot fly yet. I don't know. You unlock the Skell after doing a rigorous series of proficiency in Chapter 6, or after Chapter 6. And then I think you learn to fly in Chapter 9 or something. Which is fine. Like, I'm happy that that's gated, because I don't want to be able to just fly wherever I want right off the bat.
I agree.
And
Yeah.
that sense of power progression seems to be what everybody's really talking about, is like to start out on the ground in this game, going through the forests on foot, and then to eventually get the Skells, and then the Skells eventually fly. Not to bag on The Witcher, because I really enjoy Witcher 3. That's a fantastic game, easily in my top 3 of the year. But like whenever I finished a mission or a quest in Witcher 3, I got some money, and maybe I got a sword that was probably not as powerful as the current sword I was using. So there wasn't really a power progression in that game. Like, I was playing it because the storytelling was so awesome. But when I see Xenoblade Chronicles X and the people that are really extolling the virtues of this game, they're talking about like this sense of power progression is what makes this game so special. Like, to go from, being an ant on the ground to being, flying around in this giant mechanized Skell.
Yeah.
That sounds really, really cool. And I think that's something that a lot of open world games kind of have to have, that self-reflection right now, is like, you need a power progression that makes you feel like you're getting stronger and stronger. Like Fallout,
and not just in terms of numbers.
Yeah. And that's really where I think Witcher kind of runs into some trouble. I think that's where Fallout runs into some trouble in some ways. Like Witcher 3, you level up as Geralt, and that means that you get to put a skill point into something, and now like your fire spell does 50 more damage.
See,
And
I
I'm not
agree
a
with
huge
the
fan of
concept
that.
of what you're saying. I agree with the concept of what you're saying here, but I think The Witcher is not, in my opinion, not the best example, because I think a lot of the skills do let you change the way you play in The Witcher.
Yeah, and then you realize art is the best thing ever, and you just use that over and over again.
But that's how you chose to play. There are other ways to do it.
Art
You
is
use
the best
Igni.
way to play that game.
Igni
the
is way
progression
better.
thing.
I like shields.
It's not unique to Xenoblade X by any means, but it reminds me a little bit of the power progression in the earlier stages of MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would liken getting a Skell to like unlocking your mount, or maybe unlocking your job or something like that.
Or you're flying chocobo.
Flying,
Yeah,
yeah. I was just going to
something like
say that I feel like they kind of had a similar mentality to how flying's implemented in Heavensward, where it's you don't get access to it immediately. You have to sort of explore on foot to learn the land and appreciate it from that level before you can suddenly, because otherwise, everyone would jump on their flying mount or their skells and fly all over the place, and you wouldn't see all the things, all the nooks and crannies that you can get
Mhm.
from the ground.
It's like maybe you shouldn't have given me the power armor 15 minutes into Fallout 4. Like
agree.
Yeah.
that was
And-
that was kind of a shame.
And like from a combat standpoint too, it lets you, start off walking and then running, and you can appreciate the scale a lot, because you'll
Yes.
see those gigantic monsters that you cannot take on right now at your level or on foot even. There are some monsters that you really need to fight in a Skell, and they'll be there as that sort of goal for you to get to, and every stage you'll get maybe larger monsters and more impressive monsters, and then suddenly you're fighting them in your Skells and they are towering over your Skell, and you're like,
You're like
wow.
flying around them, punching them, and
Yeah, I mean, just imagine like going from being a single player created avatar, just a single person on the ground, to having a party of 4 giant robots swarming around an ancient dinosaur thing. Like,
And then
so
in the air.
I think it's also important to then say that that's probably why I think divisive is a strong word for this game, but I did see some review scores that were a little all over the place. Like, people seem to genuinely like it, but I think that slower burn that kind of focused on this power progression, not giving you everything right away, kind of making you work for it. Some people say, I didn't get my skills until 30 hours in, and it was amazing. And then other people are saying, I didn't get my skills until 30 hours into the game. Like, I think that kind of is a moment for the individual as a gamer of like, are you okay with this sense of power progression? I don't think there's necessarily a bad thing if you don't want to play a game like that, but it sounds like it's kind of important to realize that this is a slower burn game that makes you, as Caitlin was saying, crawl before you fly.
just like Final Fantasy 13.
I'm not
I
going there
actually, I
today.
agree.
I'm
I
not going
actually
there
think
today.
I think it's sort of endemic to a problem of expectation in a lot of modern gaming. And I'm going to old man this thing, but a lot of people are like, "Why can't this be Assassin's Creed, where I have access to the whole world right away, and I have all my cool weapons, and I can do everything immediately?" And Shadow of Mordor is so good because I can go everywhere. Like, you shouldn't be able to go everywhere in a game right away. Like Fallout 4, again, I haven't played it much, but like, there's no reason to be able to do everything immediately. Like, yeah, give me freedom,
Yeah.
but give me something to look
To look
forward to.
forward
Like,
to.
No, yeah,
like,
I totally
like,
agree with that.
like the Skells, like there's an area, like, so one of the main things you do when you first go to an area is you hunt down sites to plant probes that give you like recon of the area. Sounds an awful lot like lighthouses from Fallout or from Assassin's Creed, and it kind of is. And then so once you do that, you get that part of the map marked and you get more fast travel locations. But then there are areas that you distinctly can tell you can't get to, and you like look up at the top of this giant mesa that is like unimaginably high above you, like just ridiculously high above you. And it's like, wow, someday I can get up there. And like that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of modern open world games lack, is that in their mad dash to give you everything right away and let you just do whatever you want, they forget that when I've done that for 20 hours, I'm going to be bored.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
in Xenoblade, you play for 30 hours, you start to get bored, then you can punch people with cannons.
that's
Then you
actually
start to get bored, then you can fly.
that's actually the part of a game that we were kind of debating whether or not we were going to cover it, but we ended up falling down on the side of no. Was a game called Dying Light, which came out in January, and like the first time you start playing Dying Light, like the sense of movement in that game is really incredible. Like it starts making you go like, wow, maybe Assassin's Creed from first person view mode with this gameplay would be really impressive. But then I started to realize, like 5 or 6 hours in the game, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and the power progression really isn't here. Like, I'm getting, as we talked about before, the new weapon that does 22 damage instead of 10 damage. And yeah, now I have a drop kick move that is very situational and I don't use very often. Like, why don't you give me, like, some. I know there's some stuff in that game, so it's not a perfect metaphor, but it's like. I got bored with the game at the moment it should have been opening stuff up, and to make it all the way back the connection to Assassin's Creed, I think Assassin's Creed 2 was really, really good about that. Like, that game had a sense of power. I mean, that was basically a game that if you had replaced Ezio with Bruce Wayne becoming Batman, it would have it really would have worked. Like, he loses his family, he then starts gaining powers, he gets better at what he's doing, he gets better at combat, he gets this new ability, he gets this new ability.
Decide
There's
not to cut his finger off.
yeah,
It's
he
like
cut, there's this
Batman Year One.
there's this really awesome power progression in that game that I loved, and I agree with you guys. I think open world games are missing that a little bit, and maybe that's why this game is kind of throwing some people for a loop, because they are expecting the Assassin's Creed, I'm going to be amazing 10 minutes into this game, whereas it's kind of
And
fun to be a little janky at the start.
I was reading some comments. It was an article quoting Shigeru Miyamoto, and it was talking about his philosophy to game design. And I don't know the article well enough to quote it, but he said something to the effect of he wants to see his player progressing, and once they hit their stride, that's when he gives them power ups, or sort of like adds layers upon the design or the power or the control that the player has. And I think that's kind of I guess it sounds simplistic, but I think it's important to remember that a lot of why, I mean, I guess everybody games differently, but for me, a lot of why I find games enjoyable. I mean, I play games mostly for narrative, for immersion, to enjoy music and nice visuals and art design and stuff. But I think that when it comes down to gameplay mechanics, it's important to have progression, because if you start a game that's sort of like, I don't know, if it's unilaterally the same game all the way through, I think that can get kind of tedious. But it depends on the kind of game, I suppose. But I think that I, I'm glad for one that Xenoblade has a little bit of gating in terms of like when you get to access stuff, because like I said, I'm about 30 hours in. I'm just shy of 30 hours, and I just got the Skell, and when I got it, it was like, holy crap. So I got in the Skell, and I was just doing donuts in the desert while lightning crackled in the paint. Like,
Oh yeah, your Skell can turn into a race car.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Did I forget to mention that? Because that happens.
Because that's awesome.
Yeah.
I,
So progression, I think, is valuable, and I think I'm very much behind the game design of like don't give the player everything right away. Let them sort of discover it. Maybe not as slowly as some games drip feed you, but I think it's important
Well,
to have some
and
stuff.
that's an interesting point because there are a lot of systems in Xenoblade in this game, Xenoblade X, and the game introduces you to some of them, like the really basic ones, but it doesn't like throw a lot of tutorials as vis-a-vis some of the more finer points. There's a an in digital manual that you can refer to that does actually explain a lot of the smaller things that aren't presented to you through like the main story and whatnot. So there's a lot for you to explore and to learn as you go. And instead of having it all thrown in your face all at once, it's a bit more of a natural kind of thing. It can be frustrating if you're like, you can do something, but you don't know how, or you see this thing and you don't know what it means. But then I pull up the manual and I find the heading and I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool, and I know how to do it. And I like that sort of approach that they did. They put a lot into the game, but they don't beat you over the head with all of the mechanics. And
I I know that's polarizing, but I actually like that. It reminds me of one of my favorite parts of Dark Souls, which was playing that game the first time, and like I hate looking things up in guides. So like in Xenoblade, it's like I don't know how this works. Hey, Caitlin and Mike, do you know how this works? No. Oh yeah, I know. This is what it is. Or like oh here's what this is. Like exchanging information. Like it's very much what I liked about the first Dark Souls, which is what the hell is a covenant? How does that work? Wait, what's happening now? Why are bats attacking me? Who are these red people that are stabbing me? Like and discovering that is sort of part of the fun. I feel like the tendency, especially Japanese games have, is to be like, here's every single thing that's going to be in our entire game and how it works in fine detail through a series of YouTube videos exploring every single thing. And not that Xenoblade didn't have that, but Xenoblade is so complicated that it didn't matter. But it's just like you don't like. It's fun to learn how these things work, not to just be told immediately and be expected to master it. Because then again, there's no sense of growth.
I know this might sound like very like off topic or like something very minuscule, but I was playing a little bit of Shadow Complex because it finally came out on PC, and I realized a couple things about myself as a gamer and how I take in information. If you try to give me something to read in a video game while I'm playing it, so like press up when you're jumping in order to latch onto this, like, and I still have full control over my movement right there, my brain goes in two different directions and I'm like the most indecisive person in the world. Like, I can't process what I'm seeing. Like, if what I'm reading is super important in a game, and this gets to what you guys are talking about with like gameplay systems and how a game teaches you how to play, if what you're trying to teach me is so damn important, please pause the game and let me read it. Like, getting a tutorial in the middle of a boss fight, like, hey, you should try to sneak around this guy while you're fighting him, like, while he's trying to blow the crap out of me. Like, I don't want to read
Boy,
that
if you
right.
had a nickel.
I'm trying to avoid getting shot right now, and you're trying to give me information. Like, Batman Arkham, the Arkham games were really bad about that in combat. Like, I don't want to be reading something while I'm playing it. Because one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to read and I'm not going to play, or I'm going to play and I'm not going to read. If something is crucially important to what I'm doing, like how to play the game, pause it or slow it down or do something to explain to me how to play the game. I actually think that Danganronpa does a pretty good job of explaining all of its trial mechanics by giving you like an example before you have to do it. Like, and that was a moment where like I could read through and understand the tutorial. And I don't mean to say that every game needs to have a tutorial, but like, please, if information is important, let me read it. Let me kind of breathe it in a little bit. I'm sorry that was such a tangent, but like that was really like Shadow Complex drove me up a wall because it's trying to give me a tutorial in the middle of a boss fight. Like,
well, Xenoblade does not do that, so you don't have to worry about that.
is the manual in the game very extensive? Like, could Steven have figured out all that information by reading through the manual?
A lot of it, actually, yeah. It's
all the way over there.
Well, it's right there on your gamepad, but
Well, yeah, like it's right. It's all the way over there, meaning I'd have to open it. But it's much easier for me to get up, walk to my room, pick up my phone, text Caitlin, wait for her to reply because we're in different time zones.
We, we, we should probably take a second for the younger viewers. Manuals are little booklets that used to come in video games that explained how the hell to play a video game. Sometimes
Wait,
they were colors,
what?
sometimes they had little comic books in them,
What are you
and they were
talking about?
really cool.
And the irony is that those games weren't as complicated.
I know, like games
Yeah.
today are so damn complicated. Like, oi, I bought
Every single
Pillars of
one of us is old, and I want you to know that.
I bought Pillars of Eternity, and just opened the manual, and I just went, oh dear God, like ah.
Baldur's Gate had a 300-page manual.
Actually, I feel bad because a couple of my students this year on the same test suddenly started getting nosebleeds, and I think that probably says something about that test, but that is how I felt looking at this manual for this game, was like, this is really intimidating. Now, luckily, the manual is brilliant, and it gives you all the information, but like, Steven's right, games are super complicated these days, and they're kind of leaving the way they tell you how to play in tutorials. If you walk away from a game and try to come back to it and you're in the middle of that game, like I tried to come back to playing Dying Light, thankfully that game has an in-game manual for me to pour over because I was completely bamboozled when I tried to jump back into that game. Like, how do I play this? But that's neither here nor there. I think you are all big on Xenoblade and we could talk about it endlessly, but we do have to walk away from it.
Actually, when we finish this podcast, I'm going to walk over to it.
Yes.
Yeah, same.
I have it. Well, I have it on right. I'm not playing it, but it's on. So
I'm playing Crisis Core again because Crisis Core is awesome.
Really wish that game was on my Vita.
They can't. It's rights.
It's not.
It's actually, it's available digitally in the Japanese PlayStation Store.
Oh, okay.
Just because I know that doesn't help you any, but I just want
I'm sure we will have more Xenoblades to talk about down the road. And
yes,
I'm really glad this game turned out to be awesome. It's kind of a nice treat for the end of the year. And
yeah. I wish that friggin' everyone didn't do their game of the years in late November.
Yeah.
This could actually be included.
I gotta say, the Game Awards, I was like, their cutoff was only a few weeks away from Xenoblade, and I was like,
It's just so stupid. So what? Does it not get considered next year at all? Because I mean, a year is long enough that people will kind of be like, oh yeah, that came out.
Yeah,
didn't
that
it?
came out, right.
I mean,
Yeah.
time is a factor. Like it's not gonna be fresh in people's minds next year when we've got Persona 5 and Final Fantasy 15. Like, come on now.
yeah.
You think?
Come on, Patty.
Okay, so the Video Game Awards, just real briefly. I don't mean to call out Jade Raymond. Did she seem drunk?
I didn't see.
She seemed really off. Like she came out and made this really weird David Hayter not playing Snake joke.
Oh, I missed that.
And then they kind of made a mistake. Like they screwed up the award that she was giving out because it went to the actress from her story, but they labeled The Witcher 3, so that caused a little controversy. Like the lead director for The Witcher 3 is sitting in the back going, "What?"
Oh yeah, I saw that part.
Yeah, he was like, "What in the world's going on?" But she came out and she was kind of like all over the place. Maybe she was just really nervous. Maybe the teleprompter had broken or something. But it was really awkward. But overall, I enjoyed the Video Game Awards. It was fun again this year. I think that Jeff Keighley's doing a good show. There were some good announcements in there. It was fun.
Nice tribute to Iwata.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
got the feels. I got the feels.
I did
and
watch that part.
Reggie did a really good job, talking about how important video games were, and it was just a really positive moment, and I was surprised how long it went. Like they didn't, get a hook or only give him like 30 seconds. Like they made it a real moment in the middle of the show, and that was really cool.
And then Konami got sick burned like 5 times.
Oh my god!
And
That's part of the show.
And then what's her name said not directly to Kiefer Sutherland, but to someone who was like, "Yeah, there's no Snake without David Hayter."
That was Jade Raymond.
And I was like, "What is up with all this freaking drama?"
Yeah.
The cynic in me thinks it was all intentional to get more people talking about the show, but I don't know. Even then, like, there was straight up a sequence where what's his name, Jeff Keighley, was like, "Yeah, Konami wouldn't let Kojima come because they're mean."
Yeah, that was weird. That was really weird.
But like on the other hand, like that's the kind of candor that you don't normally get in this industry from types like Jeff Keighley. Although I actually think he probably gets a little more flack than is deserving, considering how earnest he is.
Yeah, and for him to kind of call Konami out like that, I mean, and I know he's friends with Kojima like that. He was probably a little pissed, like all of a sudden he's expecting Kojima to come out to this thing, and then apparently Konami says, no, you can't go out there. Like, that's kind of messed up.
Because he has 30 days left on his contract.
Apparently. My game Bloodborne kind of got snubbed at the video game awards left and right. Didn't really win anything, but I got a chance to play through the Old Hunters DLC. Which good lord, that thing is hard. So Old Hunters kind of gives you three new areas and almost doubles the weapon count in the game, which is kind of ridiculous. And it's really fantastic. I was very nervous going into this piece of DLC because I did not like the Dark Souls 2 episodes at all. I seem to be in a minority when it comes to that. A lot of people really like those pieces of DLC. Okay, I guess you like fighting, giant enemies with giant weapons over and over again. That's cool. Also, a ridiculous boss in the Fume Knight, but yeah, okay, to each their own. If they really enjoyed it, that's great. But this DLC felt so much more like Artorias of the Abyss in that it was adding not just a lot of new weapons, a lot of new enemy types, but also giving you, unique scenarios, different kind of traps than you had seen before, different environments. I found it funny that some reviewers were kind of like, the environments are using a lot of reused assets. I'm like, yeah, the first environment out of the three. Did you get to the other two environments? Because, looking at that trophy list, I seem to be one of the only people that beat that last boss, which, good God, he was hard. But it's it's a really awesome piece of DLC that I would put up to the level of Artorias of the Abyss, and I think it fills in some really awesome story gaps. It was very enjoyable, and I think it was a good way for Bloodborne to end. And what I said to Steven when we were kind of having our back and forth talking about Bloodborne, talking about Dark Souls 3 is if Sony tomorrow announced Bloodborne 2, I'd actually be bummed. Like, I would actually be bummed out because I
He
actually.
says,
No, no, no.
lying.
I want those guys to make something different right now. I really, really want them to make something different. I enjoyed Bloodborne. I enjoyed Dark Souls. Those games are fantastic. I love them. But, if we found out Miyazaki was making a science fiction game or something, I would be way more on board with that right now because I've kind of seen a lot and I've kind of played the same game, what, 5 times now? Like, 4 times. Well, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, 4 times now, coming up on five with Dark Souls 3. And so I am feeling a little bit of that fatigue right now. I would be okay if they would do something a little different, but I seem to be in a very small minority when it comes to that. A lot of people are losing their minds over Dark Souls 3, and maybe that game will be fantastic, but I think it's time for something new. And I think back when Zach was on
Sci-fi Dark Souls.
You
Sci-Fi
know,
Souls.
it's a funny story because I was the backup for Robert's stream of the Old Hunters, and we actually kind of joked about that, about having kind of a Dead Space meets Bloodborne kind of game, and thought that would be really cool. So do it, From Software, do it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see something because, you can have too much of a good thing. I really do believe that, and it's time for them to do something a little different. But I think the Old Hunters is definitely worth your money if you're a big Bloodborne fan. It kind of sounds like nobody's really interested in talking about this game, and that's okay. I'll just continue to be the Bloodborne defender on this show. But
No, we've
Well,
talked it's because we spent the entire week talking about Bloodborne via text. And it's not that I don't like Bloodborne, and I definitely plan on beating it, but I really feel like the weapon design in that game is great. Like, I think on a, like, polish and systems level, it is definitely superior to Dark Souls, but I am never as excited to explore in Bloodborne as I was in Dark Souls.
and
And I would say Bloodborne is more focused, and that's a good thing, and I'm definitely going to finish it and likely play this DLC. But it's just one of those things where one does not simply just start playing Bloodborne again. Like, you play and die 600 times and remember, and like, I don't remember where anything is. I'm like in the blood-starved beast church and like, 10. The last thing I remember was getting murdered by some witches in a forest, and then I killed the witches, and then I moved to Japan. But
yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I do disagree with you in a way because I think that especially with this DLC, so I'm obviously using that argument. With this DLC comes a lot more build variety. They've kind of made it so that arcane builds and blood tinge builds are a little better. Um, I would rather have the individuality of each one of these weapons versus okay, you have this type of katana, and then you have this other type of katana that has slightly different stats. But I will say, I do agree with you that I wish that they had gone a little fuller with their upgrade system, like lightning path, fire path, instead of having the gems. I don't think the gems quite replaced it as well as it could have. But man, that combat is fun, and the bosses that are in this DLC are really impressive. I think they actually do a really good job of making it so that in the base game, if you went co-op, it was really easy to steamroll some of these bosses. That's not the case anymore because these dudes, they hit really, really hard now, but they are completely fair. And the thematic thing for me is like a couple of the missing story pieces from the base game have been, re-added in, or maybe they got a chance to expand upon them. And the story that they're telling and the focus on environmental storytelling is, I feel now, head and shoulders above the other Souls games, to the point where it's almost hard to go back. Like some of the subtleties that they're doing with their storytelling, and I still refuse to reveal. If you've somehow not had Bloodborne spoiled for you in terms of what's really going on in the story, hats off to you, because every reviewer in the world has tried to spoil what this game is really about, and I personally have a huge problem with that. I think it's a great thing to experience. This would be like if, people gave away a certain Metal Gear Solid game from 2001. It just works with that kind of twist in what's going on. And now it works even better because of some of the story beats that are in there. So, play the old hunters. If you didn't like Bloodborne, I don't think this is going to change your mind. But if you did really enjoy it, I think that you are going to love it even more now with all the expansion stuff that they've done. It's really, really impressive.
So you're really feeling it then.
I am really feeling it. Hey, the game made me go away from the axe. The game gave me a new weapon that I like more than the axe. I think that's saying something.
It's a battle
Which
axe.
weapon?
The Beast Hunt Safe, the kind of modified version of the saw cleaver that is a long sword in its regular form, and then it's the kind of very short dagger form that is super fast and has an awesome lunging attack that lets you really close in gaps really fast. It's a hyper aggressive weapon, and I fell in love with that thing.
Interesting.
I fell in complete love with that. I was actually the bosses in this DLC are so damn fast that just relying on like axe swings over and over again is going to get you killed.
How
Like,
many bosses are there?
there's five. So there's. Thank you, Caitlin, for giving this to me, because you threw a softball right up in the air. One of my biggest complaints about the Dark Souls 2 DLC was the palette swaps, because they just outright palette swapped a couple bosses, and I think that's really cheap. They palette swap one boss. Somebody trying to get in there, or was that just skipping?
Oh, I was just saying. Then the Dark Souls. Oh, Dark Souls 2 DLC. Here.
Yes, two, not one. There's one palette swap boss in in Bloodborne, but he's got a unique little trick up his sleeve when you get him down to half health, which is kind of cool. And then there's four other bosses, and I would say one of the four other bosses is a little lame, but then the other three are absolutely fantastic. Like, absolutely fantastic, awesome fights that I have actually enjoyed playing over and over again.
Despite the fact that they're really hard.
They are super hard, but I have really enjoyed playing them. I think that they really show that combat system at its peak. The only complaint that I really have is that they show the combat system at its peak. So when things go wrong, when like the camera flips out and you get killed because the enemies can hit you in one shot, I really want them to work on their camera system a little bit. A couple of the enemies rely on lots of jumping attacks, and we know what happens in a Souls game when the enemy jumps up in the air. The camera kind of loses them, and all of a sudden you have no idea where they are, and you better just time your dodge correctly or you're dead. So there's a little bit of that, but overall I
That's
think
rough.
they do a little bit of that, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but overall they've made something really special. I had a really good time with it. I could talk about it for a while longer, but just go out and get it if you want to get it.
Just try it out. Just give it a shot.
Just give it a shot. Just
I
do
was
it.
sorry. I was quoting that comic that made fun of Dilbert a couple of years back. Just do it, man. Just check it out. NFL.com. Just do it. Just check it out.
Oh, well, actually, on that point, question. Where does this take place vis-a-vis the main game? Do you have to have beaten the main game in order to play it, or is it somewhere in between?
So this is about a third of the way into the main game. It's after you beat Vicar Amelia, which is in the Cathedral Ward. After you beat her, which is kind of where the game really opens up and kind of starts giving you some thematic changes, there's an item that shows up in the Hunter's Dream. You pick that up, and then you go to a certain place, and you can find that out online. I don't want to give it away here. And then that certain place takes you to this kind of offshoot area that is another separate dream from the main game. They recommend that you be level 65. I think that's insane. I think you need to be closer to level 90 and have a +9 weapon because this DLC is really freaking hard. Like, I went there originally at level 65 with a +6, and I got my ass handed to me. Like it was ugly. It was really. I think I caught a little bit of that in the stream where I wanted to be like, "You guys need more. You guys need more health. You need more damage because you're getting destroyed right now."
Yes, it was very interesting to watch because I it was good because I remember when we streamed Canehurst with you way back, you didn't die at all, and I think some people were actually a little bit disappointed that they didn't get to see you die.
Well, I'm
So,
just that damn good, or I got
so, uh,
lucky. It was that damn lucky.
so Robert died, and I think that was satisfying.
Other Robert, not me.
Yeah, the other, well, he's Robert. You're Rob.
Yes, I am the Rob. I am the Rob. So it's really cool. It's really cool. It's an awesome way for them to end it. And now I want different stuff. And maybe Sci-Fi Souls is the way to go. But would you do ranged combat or would you continue to do melee combat? I think you'd have to do ranged, wouldn't you?
But that could be really interesting to see what they do with that and how
Yeah.
they would develop it from where how it's used right now as a sort of a secondary and a staggering tool.
I think that was actually one of my favorite ideas for a game was when I played a little bit of Dead Space 3, which is not a very good game, but it kind of had like some randomized elements and like you went on to different ships and you were dealing with enemies in different locations and that part of the game worked. The microtransaction and weapon design was kind of terrible, and that's what ended up ruining that game. But I really liked the idea of having this sci-fi game in that kind of Souls, Metroidvania, horror vein. And I think you could do a ranged combat system that was really interesting. And I love Dead Space 1 and 2. I was talking to a friend about it just tonight when we were having our Starbucks, and I said to him like, Dead Space 1 and 2 are the natural evolutions of Resident Evil 4. Like those games are taking the Resident Evil 4 game design in a cool place, and I think that From Software making kind of an RPG sci-fi game that would be really damn cool. But
Yeah, I would totally be down for it. Like Bloodborne was my first Soul game. It got me sort of interested. I'm now interested in Dark Souls 3 and I love Dead Space. I would feel like that could be a really interesting merger of those two ideas. To have that very dark, grim. I mean, Dead Space is already kind of dark and grim, but to even go a little bit further and to see how they would design a sci-fi setting, like they could be a really unique take on sci-fi in general, I think.
yeah, I would agree with you. So apparently we need to get working on that game right now because
Yes.
that might be something. Too bad about that. Did you play 3? Did you play Dead Space 3?
I haven't gotten to it yet.
Microtransactions or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and and they wanted you to play co-op, and it was just
Yeah,
the
that was kind of a turn off, actually.
making your own weapons was not very interesting. Universal ammo was beyond stupid. It was like just bad
Because it
decision.
worked so well for Deus Ex 2.
Yeah, it was like bad decision after bad decision with that game, and even like the base, they even got the rhythm of the game wrong because it was like it used to be that if you got hit in a Dead Space game, like you got hit. Like it's very Souls-like in that way. Like you take a lot of damage. Dead Space 3 was like you were getting hit all the damn time, and like enemies wouldn't respond consistently. Like the whole point of Dead Space is you hit them. And you can kind of do the juggling act like Resident Evil 4. Like, I'm going to hit this guy in the legs, and I'm going to hit this guy in the chest. I'm going to hit this guy in the head. You're juggling enemies. You couldn't do that in 3. Like, you would hit a guy twice in the leg, and then the third time they would just say, screw you, and just run straight at you. And you're like, well, then what's the point? Like, so I should just fire as fast as I can. I shouldn't try to juggle them anymore. But we were just talking while Steven was in the bathroom or whatever, but we were talking about how like make a Souls like sci-fi game and maybe making it a focus on ranged combat. You might be able to do something really cool there.
Well, I think Dead Space is a great example for that. Like, make it a Dark Souls is already basically a survival horror game. Like Ben
Yeah.
and I are talking about this a lot. The best part of good survival horror games is when they put an obstacle in front of you that you don't want to confront and force you to confront it.
Uh-huh.
Like in Resident Evil, you know what's going to happen in that hallway, but you have to go through anyway.
Well, no, you don't. I don't have
And
to go through there. I'm not going through there. No, 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 no.
exactly, and it's you're managing your resources, and like you make Souls games have almost the same thrust. So you make a Souls game that's focused on range combat, and it's like, no, I do have to go through that scary spaceship tunnel.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've beaten around the bush enough. I don't think we have anything else to talk about today. No other news, no other giant
Uh,
controversies,
no,
nothing. No, no,
no,
no. We're good
no,
today, right?
no, not with the intro that you gave us. We can't ignore
Okay.
it.
So if you somehow have been living under a rock for the past week, the PlayStation Experience, we got to see the first in-game footage of
Shockingly,
what is now, I know, I was like, holy crap. The first in-game footage of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is apparently what they're calling it. Uh, Apparently, our Final Fantasy VII reunion just wasn't good enough. Like,
And it would have also been an R.
in one way, I at least appreciate why they said they were like, we didn't want to leave anything to the imagination that this was a compilation of Final Fantasy VII thing. They were like, they wanted people to know for sure this is the remake of Final Fantasy VII. I could still see them retitling it though.
reunion Final Fantasy VII. So it looked, dear God, it looks good.
Awesome is like somehow not enough.
Like in engine, no less. Like I actually think it looks better in play than in its cutscenes.
I would agree. Like there's a weight to everything that's going on. And so
Cloud looks awesome. Cloud looks sickly like he's supposed to.
yeah, and it looks to be, it was a little jarring at first to see that it was active combat, even though I think we all at E3 we all kind of said, look, it's most likely going to be some kind of active combat system, especially with what they're doing with Final Fantasy 15. But
Well, to be fair, they've also said quite a bit about there is an ATB meter in there, and they were like, we are aiming for this to be slower paced than even like like your Dissidias and whatnot. They were like, we want you to be switching characters
yeah,
and strategizing. So I'm okay with that sort of concession. I'm actually wondering if it's going to be like Crisis Core, like because they've said it's not going to be exactly like it, but like in Crisis Core, when you have a menu of commands, like sort of like what they showed in that demo, and like when you hit attack, Zack runs to the nearest enemy and attacks them. It's not a full action game. Like you are still issuing commands.
right, right. It certainly looked stupid impressive. It had the voice of Jet from Cowboy Bebop, which like I lost my mind over because that's now
Barrett,
The perfect voice.
the perfect
Barrett
voice of Barrett.
looked awesome. Barrett looked awesome in
Barrett
that.
has
Yeah.
Barrett has
Maybe he
gone
could have been a little bigger, but
Barrett went from, let's be very fair, it was a different time and it was also a much more anime look, but he went from looking like a stereotypical black man with Mr. T like
Mr. T, yeah.
can
to
we talk about that?
go for it, dude.
So my roommate and I are sort of on an FF7 high right now, and we're playing the PS4 release of the original, and like Barrett's a really interesting character, and I won't take too much of the remake time here with this, but like Jeremy Parish wrote a really good article. There was all that backlash to Barrett, and again, this is just one person's opinion. There was all that in hindsight, it was like, oh, Barrett has a lot of stereotype issues, and from the surface, Barrett does seem like a lot of like stereotypes, but there's also a lot to his character that's actually, even among the entire canon of JRPG characters, to that point that's really interesting. Like Barrett's like motivations and the way he develops as a character. And I never realized this, but FF7 didn't have a single native English speaker in its localization at all. Like everybody was native Japanese. And so a lot of people think the way Barrett was and it sounds terrible to say this, and it is terrible, but it was a cultural misunderstanding that they were trying to make a character that appealed to Western audiences, and that's what they thought it would be. And the way Barrett definitely has mannerisms that are a teensy weensy bit racist, but on the other hand, I think it's one of those things where you can't discount entirely the value of something due to its flaws. Like, to have a nuanced discussion of anything, you have to discuss the pros and cons. And Barrett has a lot of really good character parts about him too. And
Yeah. It's like he's
I
a
think
loving dad. And
Yeah, this was not the. I was listening to Old Giant Bomb podcast the other day, and this was not the uh, Resident Evil 5 moment of walking into the African village and a bunch
oh,
of spear
oh boy.
chucking natives jumped out wearing grass skirts, and it was like, oh dear, like
Yeah, like
yikes.
I think a lot of what comes off wrong about Barrett has to do with his vocal mannerisms almost entirely. Um, because then you look at his backstory, and like Barrett is a guy who's just made repeated failures, and like throughout, with dying and with his daughter, and like there are so many little nods in the beginning of Final Fantasy VII, like the fact that the Gold Saucer Barrett date is a joke, but to get Barrett, you really do have to sort of court the things he would care about, like. Barrett says to you on the elevator in Shinra that he's sorry for bringing you into this, and you're like, wow, Barrett is thinking about the fact that he got his entire village tanked by Shinra, and he thinks his best friend is dead. And, Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse just got tanked under the plate. So it's like, Barrett on the surface, I think, is a sort of a terribly racist stereotype, but I think there have been a lot of people better informed than me that have written a lot of really good things on the fact that even with flaws, there are still a lot of good things about Barrett. And that's just a really roundabout way to say that I think his design in the remake I was about to say a bad word, is awesome, other than the fact that he's wearing sunglasses in a Mako reactor at night.
Yeah, and he looks proportionate now. Like they did a really good job of taking the original Nomura artwork, still making it look fantastic and making it really fit that world. And it was just this moment of seeing this game in motion was just like, this is really happening, guys.
Cloud
This
Pack
is,
jumping off the train. I went, "Ee!"
I mean, I hugged Steven when we realized at the Sony press conference what they were announcing. Like
Oh,
at
yeah.
E3, like I reached
I can
over to
just
him
imagine.
and I said, "Oh my effing god, they're doing it. They are effing doing it." Like it was this moment of like you could not believe it was actually happening.
And they,
And
they,
then
well,
And
no,
then I hugged Rob back.
I did hug Rob back, but to say and again, there are a lot of I watched a video from the PlayStation Experience of people reacting to that trailer, and it's actually really funny. Like they show the combat, and the internet, obviously everyone hates everything, so they're like, oh, it's not turn based, but like everybody in the audience cheered super loud when they showed the combat, and like when
yeah,
they showed Barrett, everyone's like, ah, so it's sort of fun to be a part of this collective excitement. And I think the news of it being split, which I think that takes away from the general positivity people had after that trailer. Uh, you know,
well, let's pause. Let's pause with how this happened because my bigger issue is I think that there was a right way and a wrong way to announce that this was going to be what it is. So Sunday night after the PlayStation experience, it's about I want to say about 9:30, 10 o'clock my time. I'm getting ready to go to bed, and the internet just kind of breaks when I see the first story that says Final Fantasy VII is going to be episodic. And I'm like, say what? Like, what's going on here? And Steven's right. Like, this is coming out of Japan time, the next afternoon. Like, it makes sense in terms of Japanese time versus being in America. But it was like this really oddly, like, phrased, very nebulous, like, well, we have so many things going on with this game, and there's so many different things that we want to tell, and we don't want to make a compromised experience, so we're making it's going to be multi-part. Each part is going to be its own thing. It was this real like, huh? Like there was massive confusion after what they were trying to say, so much to the point where Katase had to come out today or was it yesterday, and release a statement trying to clarify the tire fire that is going on right now because I don't think they were quite ready to make this announcement. Compare this to when they announced the Fabula Nova Crystallis, 3 Final Fantasy 13 games, where they said, here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the third one, this is what each one is. Regardless of how that turned out, there was very clear messaging on what each one of those parts was. This was like a retranslation of something that was said almost offhand, and now everyone's confused. And what happens when everybody's confused? Everybody gets really pissed off.
Well, it's the internet, so they get really pissed off no matter what happens.
And it's Final Fantasy VII, which is
sacred
near and dear.
Yeah.
I think everyone's going to have expectations, has expectations about this, and I think this is one of those cases where expectations turn out to be different. They didn't announce it perhaps the way they should have, and suddenly everyone's freaking out because what they expected it to be is different, and we're still not sure what exactly it is, and now we don't know what to expect because we're still trying to figure out details about what does episodic mean, what kind of installments are we talking about here. And we probably need to exercise a little bit of patience and wait for more details, because I have questions. I mean, we all have questions. How much?
That's
How much
deep.
is it? How much is it going to cost? What's the time frame we're talking about? How are they going to integrate? Like, going from one installment to the next, is it going to be seamless, or is it going to feel like?
As Steven said to me, Barrett will remember that. And I was like, "Oh, you bastard. Why would you put that into my head?" Because that's like the ultimate fear. I think the ultimate fear is not trying to cut you off, Caitlin, but the ultimate fear is that this is going to be very piecemeal, like the big epic overworld and stuff. Like, that's the number one fear that I'm hearing out of people. Regardless, nobody has said that the overworld is gone, but that's what people are nervous about, is that their vision of Final Fantasy VII is going to be compromised.
Yeah, I think, again, I probably maintain a more optimistic stance on this than many do. I was initially pretty weirded out by it, but it sounds like they're basically just splitting it into 3 full games. And I agree. Like, I would like to see an overworld. I personally don't think we're going to get one. I never have thought we're going to get one. But on the other hand, they're splitting it, and they've said, and there's are varying degrees of people who believe this. And this is certainly part of it, is that absolutely that they'll be able to get, 2 or 3 money out of people. But I also, knowing how, when we've been writing in the games industry for a couple of years now, and, we know games developers, and I honestly, you could count CD Projekt Red as a counter to this, but there's something to be said for their claim that they're like, yeah, to recreate Final Fantasy VII in the way people want it, to look as good as that trailer, it's going to be gigantic.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
And, again, this is Square Enix we're talking about. And, so on the one hand, I'm a little, I'm gun shy about this idea of installments, because it does mean you're going to have to pay more than once. And, no matter what anyone says, we'll be pissed off if we have to pay $60 3 times. Every single one of you is going to.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So they've got us by the short hairs there. It's a case of, even if I don't accept that it's impossible, because again, look at how big The Witcher is, look at how big Xenoblade is. But again, those are all
15.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, look at the style of those games compared to Midgar. Like, Final Fantasy 15 is a pretty game, but nothing I've seen out of that game has been as detailed as, for example, that one location in the demo in the few seconds of the 7 remake we saw. Mm-hmm. This is we are expecting Midgar on its own could be an entire game. I mean, Crisis Core takes place, well, I mean, all over the place, but like, Midgar is a uniquely designed area in a world full of uniquely designed areas. So if we are all in fact saying, we want Midgar to be explorable, we want a world map, we want to make sure we don't lose any of the important story beats, we want the cross-dressing, we want the singular moments that make up Final Fantasy VII, then, no matter what we say, the fact of the matter is designing that experience would be different than designing a Witcher, would be different than designing a Xenoblade. So in that regard, yes, I can appreciate that, yeah, we're splitting it because this game would be gigantic. And I still think that could hurt the narrative. There are a lot of things that could go wrong with that. But on the surface, if they are truthful in saying we know everyone wants everything and we want to recreate everything, if we get 3 Final Fantasy VII games or 2 Final Fantasy VII games that are complete experiences that are synced together well, that do in fact recreate that game the way we want it recreated, then I'd be okay with it. If they go, because they can no more confirm they're doing the cross dressing scene. So that's going to be, and
The fact that we were all so concerned about that.
his quote for it was great too. He said something along the lines of, "Oh, I haven't designed it yet, but I want to make sure Cloud is as beautiful as possible."
But I think I take them at their word when they talk about how insane this game's going to be. It's going to be to make this game in HD. I mean, Seven, just think about the first disc of Seven and all the different stuff that goes into that game. And, my favorite part of Seven is all the stuff in Midgar. I actually think the game starts extremely strong by having that highly linear structure. I think it works it out because of things like
Although
the cross-dressing.
I do think people forget that the opening of Midgar is like two, maybe 3 hours of that game.
Not the way I played it. I mean, I spent like 5 or 6.
The way we played it as kids, but my roommate and I played it recently.
It can be very fast, yeah.
It's straight up. It's like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours.
But I think that I'm trying to be very optimistic about this. I had the eye rolling. I had the Telltale Games as the only company. Telltale is the only one that's really gotten episodic gaming right. So there is that major concern in the back of my head.
I don't agree with that.
Half-Life 2, Episode 3, believe. Who would you say has done episodic gaming as besides Telltale?
Well, for starters, the new King's Quest games, those are individual.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, okay.
They're related. A lot of people really enjoyed Life is Strange. I've played the first episode and liked it.
Okay.
I don't think episodic gaming on its whole is done wrong. Like, I like as an example, here is the danger of releasing something in installments. Resident Evil Revelations 2 is like the best game in that series in a long time, and nobody cares about it because it was released episodically.
Right, they released one a week.
Nobody cares.
And there was no point in releasing it. There was no point in releasing one a week because the entire game was finished.
Correct. And, so with FF7, I think the problem, like, they've been careful not to use the word episodic. So, because I think that's the fear, is that they're going to do Telltale games, Barrett will remember that, and, every area is going to be
Tales from the Planet.
Self-contained. Nothing is really going to carry over. You're not going to go find your gold chocobo and hunt down, a Knights of the Round materia. So if they're building this in Final Fantasy VII Part 1, Final Fantasy VII Part... Like, if they're splitting it the way they split The Lord of the Rings, or the way you split these parts of one narrative, I can see merit in that, because I do think there are actually some fairly organic stopping points in that game's story. But, I think what a lot of people want is they want, well, in Part 2, am I going to be able to continue exploring the areas from Part 1? Am I going to be able to go find the Turtles Paradise posters? Am I going to see Don Corneo in Wutai later? Is Vincent, who I'm almost positive is going to become a mandatory party member, because he basically, he would have been, like, Yuffie sort of has no bearing on anything, but,
she's still awesome when we love her.
Eh.
I love her, so shush.
I want to see her more fleshed out.
I like Yuffie, but her relevance to Final Fantasy VII is pretty limited to that one quest. And this is a chance for them to work that in better. Like, Vincent was always going to be, I think, a real party member, and I think just due to time he got made optional. But, like, you see how many hooks he has to the story. If they want to keep it true to the spirit of Yuffie, maybe make the whole sequence optional, but make that side quest where, she keeps popping up throughout the game and annoying you, and then eventually joining you. That would be cool. But, I think the thing is if they make these 3 separate installments, and the third one is like, yeah, you can go to Junon, part of Midgar, and the North Crater, that's going to be disappointing.
Yeah. I'm really trying to keep an open mind here. I think the biggest takeaway I have for this is Square Enix still every once in a while gets their PR kind of screwy. I think this was a case of that, and I'm not ready to, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I got my Dragon Quest 7 and 8 3DS announcements, so I still love them right now. But I think it's okay to be concerned, but much the same way as we talked about, the Star Wars trailers for The Force Awakens.
I'm seeing that a week from right now.
I know. I don't think there's a lot to be super upset about and a lot to be super concerned about, because like Caitlin said at the very start, all we have right now are questions. And I think that Square Enix should listen to those concerns. I am personally very worried that they're going to try to bring all of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII garbage into this game.
Okay,
I say garbage.
garbage.
I say garbage, and I mean that very harshly. I don't need Dirge of
Yeah,
Cerberus.
no, no.
I
You
really
may not.
don't want that in there.
I
Okay, I know
love
everyone.
Vincent, but no.
I know people don't like the way Dirge of Cerberus plays, but Dirge of Cerberus has an interesting story. Crisis Core has an awesome story, and I would be unsurprised. I would. Both of you should get ready for Genesis, Kadaj, Yazoo, and Laws to be in this in some form.
I think you're right. I think you're right. But there,
Genesis is going to be a mid-game boss battle of some sort.
I think
Like,
one of the things that I don't like about Seven was how they screwed around with the canon and retconned, and they added stuff that didn't need to be added. Like I get that you love Crisis Core, so I'm not necessarily talking about Crisis Core, and all the Zack stuff was already a hook in the game that they could expand on. And that's a smart way of doing that stuff. But there are also aspects like I hate Advent Children. Like I hate that movie. Like that movie is just giant fan service to get a Cloud versus Sephiroth fight in CG. And it's gorgeous and the music works, but it is completely unnecessary.
it's unnecessary. I agree, and the narrative of it is not great. But I also don't know that they would add that to this.
I know, but that's my concern is when they talk about when there's some of that nebulous language talking about how big Final Fantasy VII is, that's some of the stuff that I think they might be talking about. And so if it is just the main game, doled out into small chunks so that we can get it in a timely manner, okay, I can be on board with that. And I am kind of on board. Maybe I'll be upset if there isn't an overworld, but if it's that super fun, high density linear gameplay that made Midgar so special to me, one of the reasons why I still remember the Shinra Tower, I'm on board. Like, I'm still very open minded to this game, but I think it's fair to say that Square Enix kind of announced it in probably the worst way they could have done it. And the internet gave a collective, yeah, and they need to do some damage control on it. I also find it very interesting that this game is Unreal Engine 4. I
Yeah,
think that's very surprising. Like, I think that shows that this won't be an open world game because all this time that they've put into their open world engine for Final Fantasy 15, it sounds like they're saying, well, screw that. Like, this
well,
is way faster.
I think what people need to realize is that they're not trying to build Final Fantasy 15 because the number of people saying, "Oh, it's got action combat," they're just ripping off the 15 engine. It's like, no, they're not
Right.
at all. That you should be happy that that is the case. They are not doing that.
I think I'm
Can
going
I
to go.
can I say something kind of controversial in that I'm actually more excited by what we saw in 2 minutes of combat for the
Yeah.
remake than in everything that I have seen and experienced for myself in 15. Even
I'm
though 15's looks cool and good, I'm way more excited about the combat in
Yeah,
7 now.
I'm actually 100% with you. I think there is some nostalgia goggles in there. I think that's maybe why we're feeling that way a little bit, but I am way more excited about the 7 remake than I am, bros driving around in a car. And you can
well,
call me old. I mean, maybe that's part of it, but that game is not grabbing me the way that 7 is. But I also think a lot of the reason is because 7's characters are so iconic.
Yeah.
Like that crew. I can't wait to see Tifa. I can't wait to see what Tifa looks like. Like,
oh man, like I think their redesigns are so on point. I
yeah.
think everyone's going to look really great. I'm excited to see what Tifa looks like. I'm guessing Aerith will be close to what she looks like in Crisis Core. But there's a lot to be optimistic for, and I agree. I'm more excited for the 7 remake, but that's purely nostalgia, and that the brief bit of the 7 remake we saw, we weren't expecting it. I don't think anyone was expecting to actually see anything from this game. They were like, we're going to show something in
No.
winter. I was expecting an extended remake trailer, not gameplay. And part of that could have to do with the fact that they're splitting it into installments, that they can actually show part of this game.
Yeah.
They're showing it at Jump Festa. They added it to their to the list of things they're showing there right after this all came out. So we will have more news on it very soon.
You guys think we're going to play this before Kingdom Hearts 3?
I think we may actually be able to play it around the same time or before.
I think we're going to play it before Kingdom Hearts
Yeah,
3.
I think
I
so
think
too.
KH3 is 2017.
I think that
2017.
might be fair.
Because 15 is definitely next year, and 2.8 next year, and then 3 the following.
I think the internet needs to. It's hard for me to say this because I had a lot of the same reactions too, so I don't want people to think that I'm belittling their feelings here. But I think everybody kind of take a deep breath. Let's relax. Let's see what they're doing. I actually am not too surprised about this, considering what it's part of Square Enix, but it's a different branch. But considering what they're doing with the new Hitman game, like releasing a giant, large map every month for 3 months and kind of a chance for them. They've been really upfront about that to make changes if they see something, or if some people have some different ideas of things, they can kind of maybe implement that a little bit with the way they're going about the design of this game. It could be really good, but I think that I understand the concerns. I hear them. I'm not belittling anybody's feelings on that. It's just a case of let's see what's going on with this game before we get the pitchforks and everything.
And to be fair, they've actually been fairly consistent in messaging for that. They were saying as recently as like a few years ago, like that they were like, yeah, Seven's a huge game. If we ever did that, there's no way we could do it all in one game. So
Yeah.
it's not like that. It's not like they're surprising us with this. And again, not that it's a good thing or an inherently bad thing. I don't like the idea of paying for it 3 times or however many times. That's lame. And I don't like the idea of possibly having to wait to get the conclusion and like what splitting it up could do to the pace of the narrative. But on the other hand, if you get everything, you get everything. So we don't know enough to make any true value judgments other than that it sucks that people are going to have to pay more than once.
Yeah. Yeah. When do we think it comes out on Xbox One? Because they say first on PlayStation 4, which I'm like, oh, come on. Like, really, we're going to do this? That worked out so well for you guys with Rise of the Tomb Raider, right?
They should be the reverse surprise. The next year, the next holiday season. No, I'm not bitter or anything.
I was reading some interesting stuff on Rise of the Tomb Raider. I honestly think Square knew it wasn't going to sell to expectations on Bone, but they took the big money from Microsoft to make the game cheaper to sell, and now they release it next year on PS4, and it sells a ton, and it costs them way less money.
That's true. That's true. It could get a lot of word of mouth, because that's kind of what happened with the Tomb Raider with the first reboot, was like people realized that it was a good game and they started buying it. So,
Well, plus, it builds hype of like, yeah, it's going to be final. It's finally on PS4. Let's talk about it.
yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, they basically released the beta on Xbox.
Oof. 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 So I think the only other thing I really want to talk about this week, because maybe this is like the counter to the kind of talking and trying to assuage fears about Final Fantasy VII. I kind of had a similar reaction to a new Valkyria Chronicles announcement, or a new Valkyria game. Valkyria Revolutions is, I think, what they're kind of calling it right now. It's got a really cool name. So they announced this, and the internet gives a collective, holy crap, this is amazing. And then I see the first trailer, and I start hearing talk about action combat, and I feel like I'm on the reverse side of this, where like I'm calling for people to be calm about Final Fantasy VII, but I have concerns. I actually have a lot more concerns about the new Valkyria game. Just from
Hey,
what I've...
remember when you laughed at me because they turned my Phantasy Star series into action RPGs?
I didn't laugh at you. I was just as upset as you were. Well, not Phantasy Star Online, Phantasy Star Universe more. But
Not that I didn't like PSO, but
I I don't know. Like maybe it was just the first trailer, which was very fantastical, very like glowy sword lasers and characters, sprinting at each other, very Final Fantasy esque. That's not what I think of when I think of Valkyria Chronicles. Like I think about my scouts, moving forward and my tank lumbering forward. And maybe this new action combat will be awesome when they first show it. They've talked about how this demo is going to allow them to collect a lot of feedback, just like the Final Fantasy 15 demo. There's a lot of really positive things to talk about here, but I didn't get a Valkyria-ness when I watched it. Am I alone in feeling that right now? Am I being the crazy one like Tinfoil Hat right now about that?
I haven't watched anything from it.
Yeah, I'm also been bad. All I've seen are the screenshots, which look really pretty. I like it. I don't know how much they're going to keep the sort of watercolor,
Mm-hmm.
painting style that they had, which was really cool and set the game apart from other RPGs. But it looks pretty, and I don't know. I mean, if it does go action, is it going to feel weird? Yeah, but I'd also just be stoked to have another game in this series because it really feels lately that they've been ignoring it.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm bitter because we haven't gotten Valkyria Chronicles 3, and are we ever going to get it at this rate? I would just love to have another game in the series, and well, assuming that this means it's coming out here too, because that's another question. But
hmm
Sega.
Steven's kind of had like the best way of articulating better than I can my points, which is that Sega is known to try new things with their properties for good and bad. So it's like, yeah, they might be trying something amazingly different with this property. Sometimes that works,
Sometimes it don't.
sometimes it don't. And so I think that's where a lot of my fear is coming in right now is like, as someone who really enjoys the first Valkyria Chronicles, I still need to finish that damn game and just get over that damn tank that keeps breaking me every time I try to replay it. But I really like that game because of its groundedness and the fact that there are fantastical elements, but they are not the focus. I would be really bummed out if I was playing a game where I was playing the superhero in the middle of this combat, like Dynasty Warriors style. I don't want to play a game like that. Like I want to be directing my troops. I want to be like taking control of a scout, taking control of a sniper. Maybe that's still in this game. Maybe we just haven't seen enough of it, but I'm a little nervous.
It could also have to do with the titling. Maybe it is, in fact, not a Valkyria Chronicles game. Maybe it is a game set in the Valkyria universe that involves Jedi.
And it might and the other thing is it might still be awesome. Like that's the thing is like, all and this goes back to what I'm saying about 7 is that it might still be awesome, guys. Like change can be scary. Like of course it can. When they showed off Resident Evil 4 for the first time, the final version of Resident Evil 4, everybody was like, "What in the world is going on here?" And it turned out to be
Not
probably
me.
one. Well, I was on board, but that was also because I was a little bored, ha ha ha, of Resident Evil at that point. But it ended up being probably one of the most influential games of the past 15 years. I mean, it basically created the modern stop and pop shooter. Like Gears of War traces its roots back to that game. Any cover based shooter that's third person kind of traces its roots back to Resident Evil 4. So change can be good, but I think it is, it's natural to have those feelings of worry, and I think that's important. Don't light the internet on fire just because you're worried. And let's kind of see where we go with this. We're going to have a Valkyria, whatever it is, demo in the near future. And if they really do listen to fan feedback, that could also be a really good thing.
Yeah.
So it's weird. It's like on the one hand, I'm trying to be very open-minded, and on the other hand, I'm actually more nervous. So it's a weird time to be a gamer, but I'm overall happy. Did you guys see Neo, the Tecmo Koei Tecmo's Onimusha Souls at the PlayStation Experience?
Man, I really wish I didn't tune out every time I heard the word Koei Tecmo.
You need to.
But I
I'm with
honestly
you.
do. I'm just like, oh, is it going to have boobs?
I'm
Not
with
that I
you.
don't think those are great, but like, you know.
I am totally with you, dude, on that feeling. But this game looks like the Onimusha game that we have wanted, mixed with Souls, and that has me really excited.
Capcom actually just copyrighted an Onimusha.
I know. I had to show Jackie because she is a huge Onimusha fan, and we were both like, "Eee!" I remember really trying to play through 3, but it came out when I was in like mega
3 is
college.
awesome.
I really liked it, but I was like in the middle of college and had no time, like absolutely no time to play it. But I really liked what I played. I didn't like 2 so much. I really didn't like 2. But that's
I never played any of them. Please don't kill me.
oh, Caitlin.
I know we can't be friends anymore.
But to be
Can
fair,
we?
when we had PlayStation 2s, the only games we had were Zone of the Enders and Onimusha there for a long time, and the
Oy.
and the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo, so it was okay.
I did play that demo a lot.
Yes, we did. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we did. So yeah, I thought the PlayStation experience was fun. I think we got a lot of cool RPGs to look forward to. I think that's kind of a good place to end it. I think we kind of talked about our Final Fantasy VII and our Valkyria. We're kind of at a good place right now. So
Yes.
I can't wait to see more of Final Fantasy VII, though. Oh my god,
Yeah.
that game just has so much personality. I think that's one of the reasons I like it so much. It's the other reason why I like 9 so much. See, Steven,
That game is
I
so
told you I get it.
derpy. FF7 is so goofy.
It really is.
But in a good way.
No, like, yeah, it's like that's the thing that they have to remember in this remake is that Cloud is not Squall. Like,
Yes.
I can't count the number of times playing FF7. I've looked at my roommate and I've been like, oh, look at how emo Cloud is being. Like, Cloud is a boisterous kind of cocky hero type who, like,
shoulder shrugs.
He says bad jokes and, he tells everyone to get out while I fight this guy when Rufus shows up. Like,
and let's mosey, people.
Yeah, like, they really have to forget that Advent Children Cloud is not Cloud, which to me, I like Advent Children. The plot is sort of dumb, whatever. But the biggest crime of Advent Children was turning Cloud into a brooding type.
I would agree with you. And I don't want to see that, and I'm hoping that I like his voice actor already in the remake. Like he sounds like he's got just the right mix of like he's a kid.
The same guy. It's Steve Burton.
Yeah,
yeah.
But what I'm saying is he's still got that kid-like quality. It's not like what's his face doing Raiden in Revengeance, like Raiden.
Well, I mean, he doesn't.
Quentin Flynn.
Yeah.
He doesnn't always talk like that. That's only when he's in like I'm gonna murder you mode.
Yeah, which is what 90%.
Which is yeah.
Well, no, it's only in cutscenes.
Steven forgets how much there's actual murder in that game.
Rob forgets how much of that game he actually hasn't played.
I also forget how much of that game I liked because it wasn't a lot.
I
really don't like that game.
That game is fantastic.
Finally, something we can agree on, Rob.
You and I didn't like Revengeance.
Yeah.
I hated that game's camera. I thought that was absolute, like, I think that camera breaks that game because it is so damn slow. Like, I don't like anything about that game, and I'm, as I was saying,
a lot of people would disagree with you.
And that's
maybe
fine.
Maybe.
I think that's also a game that does not explain itself at all how to play it. You had to explain to me how to like counter things in the game because it does not explain it very well. Oh, that's right. It gives you a tutorial while you're trying to do the thing that you're being told to do. And now we come full circle. That said, I would love to see a sequel to that game that expands on the ideas. That's usually where I stay. Usually when I don't like a game, I'm okay if they make a sequel and they make it better. That's all I ask.
Only this time they can say, "Parasites, son," instead.
If that's a spoiler for Metal Gear 5, I'm upset with you.
Oh, God. It's impossible to spoil Metal Gear Solid 5 because there's no story. There's actually no story. You get Doge. Doge is awesome. Move on.
Well, yeah, but I mean...
Quiet, put some damn clothes on. Like, that's about all there is to it. Quiet. Seriously, put some clothes... Quiet. Oh, for God's sake. Is she dancing in the rain again? Yeah, she's dancing in the rain again. Oh, for God's sake. It's amazing how far we've come from Russian mafioso with armpit hair to Quiet. Think about that one for a few minutes.
We also had a game that involved staring at women's asses to progress in the first one, so...
Yeah, that's... Oh, Kojima. All right, so thank you everybody for listening. The reason why Derek has been so quiet is because we actually killed him and drank his blood. No, Derek had to leave suddenly in the middle of the podcast. Everything's fine, but we didn't want to kind of interrupt the flow there. But yeah, he's totally fine. He will definitely be back on the show. Everything's cool there. I think he just wanted to go play more Xenoblade. That's what I think actually happened.
Seems like...
Not that I blame him.
I'm guessing. So, thanks everybody for listening to the latest episode of Random Encounter. Please be sure to like us on iTunes and give us feedback. I know we got some feedback on the last episode. Somebody kind of called me out on the iTunes review saying that I was a little tough on the last episode and I was kind of being a dick. I would 100% agree with you. I think I was being a little bit of a dick. So I apologize for that.
Someone reviewed us on iTunes to say you were being a dick in an episode.
Yeah, gave us a 1 star. And you know what? I can take constructive criticism, and I think I was being a bit much on the last episode, and I apologize to the listeners for that. And hopefully, I've done a better job of being smiley, happy, objective Rob instead of I don't know why I'm picking a fight over this Rob. So, just in a surly mood that day.
I will keep my mouth shut and be nice.
I love you too, Stephen.
Not in regards to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So for Stephen, Caitlin, and Derek, thank you so much, and we'll see you all later.